Poker's legendary champions, next-generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of Tactical Tuesday. As always, I am joined by my co-host, Jon. Jon, you ready to break down some hands on this most tactical of days?
Yeah, definitely. We got 500 Zoom hands this week. So a little bit of change of pace from the hands that we normally break down. I don't know if we've ever done a 500 Zoom Tactical Tuesday episode yet. I don't think so.
I don't think we've ever done a Zoom hand on Tactical Tuesday before.
Yeah.
Well, what brought on the Zooming?
Oh no, this is just I guess if you've listened to the Wolves recap episode that came out last week, I guess like the listeners there will have heard that during the during the like strategy integration period where I was like really struggling to learn how to execute and kind of recall the Wolf strats, I started using 500 Zoom as like a sort of like a training ground to just get lots and lots of reps using the Wolf strats. And so these two hands that we're going to break down today sort of come from the last couple of weeks where I was playing a lot of Zoom to just kind of get better at the Wolf strats.
Yeah, get in a bunch of reps as quickly as you can. Before we dive into today's hand, by the way, if you're interested in applying for the Wolves program, I'm accepting applications at cpgwolves.com. Probably won't have the new batch integrated into the program for a couple of months, but I was thinking about it yesterday and just realized like get the applications in if folks are qualified, if it makes sense, having them hop in 3 weeks or a month early before even the training period begins after they've signed their contract just can't really be a bad thing. You know, just getting in there as early as you can so that you have more time to like study, learn, integrate, watch all the coaching replays. At this point, you know, there's probably 50 hours worth of training replays that you can watch once you're in the program. So quite intense onboarding, and want to just give folks more time. Would rather give everybody more time than less time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to kind of work in some study time at the beginning of the contract or before the contract even officially begins.
Yeah, well, once the contract begins, there's a month of study time built in. But I mean, if it's a month and a half or 2 months, then seems just better. So let's look at this first hand. Ace King of clubs. Looks like we get a min raise from under the gun, and this is Zoom, so don't know anything about anybody. We're just all shadows here. You 3-bet to 9 big blinds out of the small blind. Both of you have about, 110 bigs to start with?
Yeah.
You have Ace King of clubs. You 3-bet to 45. They call, and we go to a flop. King for Trey with 2 hearts. What are you thinking on this flop?
Definitely starting out with some sort of bet on this flop. Think you can go half pot. Think you can go a third. Don't think it, adds or detracts a lot of EV, regardless of what size you go. But I am definitely c-betting this flop.
How come definitely c-betting this flop?
Well, for one thing, I think this is a flop that I am expected to c-bet, probably with range. I think when you do have a really good hand, like mine, I don't even remember how much we told the podcast listeners, but I have Ace King of clubs on King 3-4, 2-tone, no clubs on the flop, and yeah, I think just like when I have a hand that's good and I'm expected to bet, there's no shortage of hands that under the gun player can call a c-bet with on this flop. So just gonna go ahead and start putting money in with my good hand.
Yeah, don't worry. I explained everything. You
okay. Yeah, sorry.
To what I say. You just tuned me out, waiting for your turn. So you start out with a third, and villain calls, and now the turn is the 10 of spades. So we have king 10 of spades, tray 4 of hearts, and you decide to bet 70% here on the turn.
Yeah, I don't know how much I love my turn barrel. I'm less confident in it now looking at it than I was when I did it, and definitely less confident in this turn C bet than I am like in the flop C bet. Um, I'm guessing what I was thinking when I was playing this hand in game was that I'm just like setting up for stacks on the river and just like looking at the board right now on king 10 4-3 with 2 flush draws. I just feel like I'll be perceived to have lots and lots of bluffs on the river and can get called, by pretty much every worst king X, and maybe even slightly lighter depending on how sticky my opponent is, and how many bluffs they sort of give me credit for on this run out. And so I think that's what I was setting up for here. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about this turn bet and maybe why it's not?
Does give them a lot of backdoor equity. Like they're going to have a lot of flush draws, a lot of straight draws that I think they're just going to bet the turn with. And if they bet the turn, then I'm for sure just check raising all in. I think we can get called by worse. I think like king queen, king jack can stab turn small. And again, they can even stab turn like half pot or so. And like we've talked about before on previous Tactical Tuesdays, like once they bet the turn, you're kind of at risk. And so, yeah, with this hand, I would just like check raise all in, basically.
Yeah, that was going to be the kind of the other way to play this hand that kind of jumped out to me as we were looking at the spot right now. I think like I think check jamming the turn is honestly the best way to go. I think one thing I might have been concerned about in the moment was that like the turn stab size from the in position player is generally a third, so it'd be like $50. So the turn check raise would be like really, really, really big. From his perspective, he'd be having to call like 450 or something extra. I don't think we get called by worse hands that often when we have ace king. Like I don't think like the draws that stab the turn are going to call off. I think the hands that we would expect to call off are like non-believing king jacks and king queens that like think that we just have way too many semi bluff like check jams on this double flush draw like super connected board. But I don't necessarily think that means that check jamming ace king is the worst, because if we get to like just check jam our semi bluff draws and get them to fold like their king jacks and king queens like all day, then we just get to print from that region of our range.
Yeah, and I think like it's important to note too that like at least check and then realize the data point of the size that they choose, because like it's not a slam dunk that they choose a third, right? So like,
yeah,
and that's sort of the problem we have facing a third, which I agree with all the points that you made. But I mean, they'll also bet 70% or 66% sometimes. Right. So, they'll bet half pot sometimes. So, but yeah, I get what you're saying. I think in the moment, if I were playing this hand, checking seems quite appealing. But I can see what you were thinking too by going 3 streets with a lot of available like ace queen, ace jack, queen jacks, spades, hearts. Like you just have like a lot of available draws that would make calling down kind of appealing to their bluff catchers. Although I don't know really how many great bluff catchers they have. Like 7s, 8s, 9s. I don't know if those hands are just going to like call down.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect those hands to call down, but just getting the max from, getting the max from their king X. I realized like, yeah, okay, we have a king. They only have like, king jack of hearts, king jack of diamonds, king queen of diamonds, king queen of hearts. I don't know. That's, if you start listing them out, it's kind of it's not a small number of combos.
All right,
and maybe their 10x of hearts gets stickier or whatever. Maybe they have like ace queen of hearts that improves to a queen on the river and thinks that it gets the call down now. So anyways, I just in my imagination there were a lot of ways that I could get paid on the river.
Yeah, now that we've expanded on like betting versus checking, I think it's even clearer to me that checking is better.
Yeah,
because Yeah, they bet all those hands that you're targeting anyway, or most of them. You know?
Right.
But you do bet and get called, and then we get a
Ah!
card that is not the card we were searching for, the Queen of Hearts. So I'll recap the board, the stacks that are left at this decision. The board is King, 10 of spades, tray 4 of hearts, and the river is the Queen of Hearts. So it completes ace jack. It completes all the front door flushes. King queen is now top 2 pair. And what are we thinking here, John?
That this is a disaster river. And I really wish it was a different river. I wish it was a different card and a different color. But anyways, here we are. I think like all my plans for like value jamming the river have gone down the drain now. Don't expect to get called by worse even close to often enough on this river. Also just get to this river with much better hands than this that, are happily jamming for value instead of this one. Queen of Hearts, I guess, just to go over kind of the basics, it's like terrible because it brings in the flushes, also improves King Queen, which is maybe one of the best hands that I was hoping to get called by. Yeah, so just lots and lots of bad things happening on this river.
Well, it also, like, for, the one bluff catcher you beat, King Jack, it also makes them hate life too.
Right, exactly. So yeah, it's just tough to find hands that are gonna want to call a jam here that are worse than Ace King.
Yeah. So with that said, like, I mean, I pretty much know what I guess my plan would be here with Ace King. Probably just check folding, I think.
Okay.
Like, I don't. Yeah, it's just. And you check, villain jams. Spoiler, I don't think you check fold.
But I mean, like, part of the reason I check here is that, like, okay, now maybe like there's some value in like getting their like spade hands, like ace 5 of spades. I don't know if they like float the flop in position with like, I don't know, a hand like 8 9 of spades. That's a little loose, I guess. But yeah, some sorts of hands like that, maybe like we can just pick off bluffs from.
Yeah,
Spade hands, but
we found one bluff.
There aren't
the ace
enough.
5 of spades, maybe. Maybe the ace deuce of spades.
Yeah.
5 6 of spades, maybe.
Jack 9 of spades makes a flush. Ace jack of spades makes a flush, or a straight. Sorry.
Yeah. Those hands make straights. Queen jack of spades makes a pair. Yeah, it's tough sledding here, finding available bluffs. I just think, I just think it's a check fold, honestly.
Okay. I did not.
No, you did not. They have the ace 9 of hearts. Really, it's just kind of a disastrous river, and one that just kind of sucks for our range, a lot of our range. Well, hand number 1 is in the books. Hand number 2, again, we're going to be 3-betting out of the small blind. Stick around, see if John loses lots more money right after the break.
Before I got Nuffle, I had run into a lot of donk bets. And I think once you play a certain amount of hands, there's something wrong with our opponent's strategies, but you don't know how to play to maximize EV against it. And it's very frustrating. I looked at the document and I couldn't believe that I paid money for it. I actually doubted that it could provide value because it was so brief. But since then, it's repaid me just over and over and over again. And it's one of the most consistent moneymakers built into my strategy that sheds light on just how bad your opponents are. And it took me 20 minutes to perfect it. And it's just amazing. Yeah, I'm speechless. It's just that good. The simplicity of it is part of it being a masterpiece.
Welcome back to today's episode of Tactical Tuesday. For the YouTube watchers, you can see John's got queued up a king and a 9. Going to try to do some damage. John, why don't you start breaking down the action of the second hand?
Sure. So more 500 zoom, folds around to the button. Again, because it's zoom, we don't know much about the button, but I think we can just go ahead and assume he's a reg for now. Button opens 2.5x. We 3-bet the king nine of diamonds to 11 big blinds, $55, and the button calls. We go to the flop about 100 big blinds effective. There's $115 in the middle, and we flop the actual nuts. King nine. Pretty beautiful.
It's a pretty good flop.
Yeah.
I don't know if you lose this one. I don't know how it's going to happen, but king nine, pretty good flop.
Jack of hearts on the turn.
So you start out by betting a third here when you flop the nut boat.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your decision here, starting out by betting. And by the way, villain in this hand started with about 100 big blinds. Jon has them well covered, so that's what we're working with. There's 115 in the pot. King of hearts, king of clubs, 9 of hearts.
Yeah, similar story to the reason I see bet the flop in the first hand of this episode. Just again, think this is a spot where I'm going to be expected to range bet almost all the time. I think there just probably wouldn't. There honestly might not be a single hand that I check on this board. I think again, just with the flush draw and like, I think getting a little bit less credit for having good hands on like paired boards. The button, especially if he's a reg, is just going to find lots and lots of hands to call with and float with, and they're even we're not worried about his good hands being better than ours. So, just starting the hand off by putting money in again with a good hand.
Yeah, sometimes the most deceptive thing you can do is just start out by betting a third.
Yeah.
Villain does call. The turn is the 10 of diamonds. So king 9, 10. Not the worst of turn cards for you, completing queen jack. You decide to check the turn.
Yeah, I think the 10, there are pretty much no bad cards for me on the turn, so I guess it's like, from my perspective, I'm sort of indifferent to whatever the turn card is. But yeah, you're right that it does complete a gut shot that is now almost certainly going to stack off. I think I think checking range on this turn is not an unreasonable strategy. Just like looking at this board and looking at the range of hands that we get to this turn with, I think checking betting range on the flop and then checking range on the turn is maybe one of the simplest ways to execute a out of position strategy in a 3-bet pot on these types of boards. That being said, I think when I have the boards just super locked up with a hand like king 9 or on an unpaired board like a hand like top set, and then I just block so much of what I would expect and hope my opponent to find a call with, and now they're sort of left with many more like second pair, third pair, and draw type hands. I'm happy to just like check these super lockdown nutted hands that block their calling range and either get them to bluff or value cut themselves.
And we're definitely hoping for a bet here on the turn. A check back is like, they're just like checking back some kind of bluff catcher, and we're most likely just going to be betting small in the river.
I mean, obviously, yeah, you're right. We are hoping for a bet, but I'm not like that devastated by a check back, even because I think like the way that I interpret checkbacks when I do check these spots is that, like you said, that they have some sort of showdown hand. And I think I get to, or generally I just go really, really big on the river versus those hands, knowing that like, okay, they have some sort of hand that wants to get to showdown and, this hopefully like thinks that the stop and go line is excessively bluffy for some reason. So I don't get that sad when I see the check back. Obviously we would just like to get all the money in somehow, but I still think that we get to bet big on the river and get called a decent amount by their bluff catchers.
Such an optimist, Jon. Such an optimist.
There's no bad things that can happen.
Well, again, you have a full house. It's easy to feel good. Villain bets half pot, which is like really great news. Because once villain bets the turn here, they're kind of eliminating the hands like queen 10, jack 10 from their range, 8, 9, ace 9, 8, 7, 6s. So they either have hands that want to put in another bet on the river or hands that want to put in another bet on the river. So they have their bluffs, their floats, and then they also have, their queen jacks and, whatever, just full houses, and king X's. So, yeah, great news. when you're facing a range that's constructed in that way, you just cannot raise the turn. Like you do not get to raise the turn, especially when the SPR is being set up to be right under 1 on the river. I just think that like they're going to jam the river here tons and tons.
All the hands that you would stack with a checkers on the turn are hands that you're going to stack on the river anyways. So
exactly, unless the river's like a 10 and they have queen jack or something.
Yeah.
If that happens, it happens. River is nice little 7, and you go ahead and check. Villain jams. Any thoughts of folding here, John? We lose to king 10.
No, we do lose to king 10.
You can never be too careful, right? Is that what
he would play king 10 exactly this way, right? So you can't even have king 10 because there's no suited king 10s that are available. So unless he's calling the 3-bet out of 3-bet from the button with king 10 offsuit, it's going to be tough to find a hand that can beat ours.
Yeah, for the podcast and YouTube watcher, there's lots of sarcasm here. You call and they have ace jack off, which again I think is a hand that's to be expected. That kind of calls a flop, turns a gut shot, and then just goes bet jam on the turn of the river. So yeah, well played hand, sir. Really like the check on the turn, and yeah, if we would have done that in the first hand, I don't know. Maybe things would have turned out differently.
Maybe we lose slightly less because we just check call the river or something. I don't know what happens on the river, even in the previous hand. Do we check call like when the queen of hearts?
I mean, if villain bets the turn, you're going to check jam.
Yeah.
So, and if villain checks back the turn, you're going to check and call a bet in a smaller pot. So
right. So we do lose less.
Yeah, we do.
I don't think villain would bet the turn in that hand with ace 9 of hearts. Probably checks back quite frequently, but anyways, neither here nor there.
Neither here nor there. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of Tactical Tuesday. Got a short little part 2 here. 8 minutes. We're getting better. CPGWolves.com if you would like to apply to the CFP program. Only one thing left to say, John.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.